Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that last session. I know it was an awesome one. I am Gayle Murdoch, and I'm really pleased to meet you. I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales Effectiveness and Performance at Canada Life, and I am just delighted to be here. These conversations can be incredibly insightful, and the panel discussion that we have coming up is no exception to that. Today, we've got three women in leadership, and they're going to share their personal experiences with gender parity and their organization's progress towards closing the gender gap. To get us started, I'm going to share a little bit about Canada Life's commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I'll share a recent story about myself and some learning that I've had around gender parity and around the importance of speaking up. But first, I am incredibly proud to be a member of Canada Life, to be a strong supporter of an actionable DE&I strategy. Within the Canada Life team, we are continuously thinking about a forward-looking view of DE&I across our products, our services, our policies, our education programs, and our leadership. Just last year, we set, in particular, two measurable goals that I'm really excited about. One is growing female representation in all management roles to 50% across each of our businesses by 2030. And the second goal is increase representation of visible and ethnic minorities in management positions to 25% by 2030. I really like these because they're highly measurable and transparent, and we can talk to our teams about them and have very clear leadership goals and action plans to get there. And this takes, commitment across all levels, across our president, our senior executive team. Every department and role in our organization has a role to play. When my team found out about these goals, we looked at some of the things that we're responsible for, and one of them was around advisor-facing events at Canada Life. And my team came to me and said, hey, let's set some goals for ourselves when it comes to our events. So they've taken upon themselves to set representation goals for women and for underrepresented groups at our events this year, and will continue on an ongoing basis as well. A little bit about myself, being a woman in financial services, in business, is great. I love my job. I love my team. I love the work that I get to do. And I know that I'm in a privileged position, and I recognize that. I feel really lucky to be part of our business community in Canada. But that doesn't mean I don't have moments that aren't easy as well. And some of these moments point to why gender parity is so important, and why conversations like the ones that you're having today are pretty crucial to continue. I learned recently, I'd say over the last 6 months or so, I've really learned the importance of staying true to myself, my values, and the importance of using my voice, even when it shakes, even when I'm not sure what to say. Speaking up when we are uncomfortable is particularly important. I had a recent situation in the last few months where I needed to decide whether or not I was going to speak up. I heard an offensive microaggression comment about a woman leader, and I had that moment where, when you feel your heart pounding and it's like in your mouth, you can feel your heart in your mouth. And I had to decide whether or not I was going to address it. So I took, 30 seconds to take a deep breath, and I introduced myself to the person, called out the microaggression, gave the individual a bit of space to self-reflect on it. And now I actually work really closely with that individual, and we've had some great conversations beyond that. Things aren't always going to work out like that did at that point. That person took it well and learned something that day. But it does remind me that, every time we speak up for ourselves, or our peers, our colleagues, or we ask for support from our allies, we grow stronger. And it actually takes all of us and all genders to get to where we want to go when it comes to gender parity, and to speak up when we see things that aren't right. And events like this demonstrate a powerful and inspiring collective commitment to that movement. So let's jump in. I'd like to introduce our next panel, which is the leadership and the gender gap. And I'm going to welcome our moderator to the stage to get the conversation going and introduce our panelists, Alex Gray. Alex is the Senior Director of Fiscal and Financial Services Policy with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So Alex, take it away, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gayle. I really appreciated you bringing in that personal story. I think it's a real takeaway that people can use and an example they can look upon to see how they themselves, on an individual level within their companies, within their professional practices, can effectively sort of redress some of these barriers to women in leadership. So thank you for sharing that. Ladies and gents, we have a wonderful panel today. We have 3 speakers at senior levels in financial services companies who are going to be able to share some of the progress that they've made and hopefully share some of their personal stories and how they've seen women in leadership evolve throughout their careers. And of course, what barriers remain and what more work needs to be done. There's been a lot of talk about the gender gap closing. And, as you know, in the 80s and 90s, it was predicted to close much sooner than it is currently predicted to do, which is somewhere around 100 years, which is complete nonsense. So without further ado, I will introduce our 3 speakers. We have Rejean Roberge. She is the Vice President, Optimum Mortgage at Canadian Western Bank. We have Dilys, Senior Vice President, Wealth and Financial Planning, Meridian Credit Union. And Stacey, the VP of Commercial Pricing at Aviva Canada. Great representation across the financial services sector, and very much looking forward to getting this started. As a reminder to our audience, feel free to use the Q&A tab to put a couple questions up on Slido. I will be reviewing them, and I have set aside time to answer them at the end of our session. So to our speakers, feel free to jump in as you like. We do want to hear from all of you, and we want to be free flowing. So let's start off. The Prosperity Project 2020-23, to repeat myself, annual report card on gender diversity and leadership states that financial services in particular are leading the way in respect to gender parity across leadership levels. To build on that, I'd be curious to hear how that or whether that resonates with your own experience. And then I'd be even more curious in looking back on your own careers and, sort of highlighting any factors or strategies you think would have been fundamental to enacting sort of real change and real progress in advancing women in the leadership ranks. So jump ball, anyone who wants to go ahead, I'd love to hear from you.
So I'll jump in. I working at Meridian Credit Union, I think it probably makes sense to just give a little bit of background with Meridian. We're the #1 credit union in Ontario, #2 in Canada. We have about 370,000 what we call members, which is the equivalent of clients, and we have about 30 billion in assets. Been around for 75 years. So we're a purpose-driven organization. Really recently launched a new strategy called the Meridian for Good, and we're really focused on helping Canadians with advice and access to capital, addressing the climate crisis, and building financial confidence. Now, why I lead into that is we recently, in the last year, have a new CEO who is a female. And so having our credit union run by a female really sets the tone and sets the stage, I think, for women to look up to, and to also really, walk the talk and see what you have. When you look at our firm, just to run through some quick stats, we have about 60% of women at Meridian. And when you break that down, 58% of our board members are women, and close to 50% at the senior leadership team level. VPs and SVPs are women. And what I'm very proud of as a woman leading a line of business, we have three major lines of businesses, which is business banking, retail, and wealth. Two of the SVPs that run the lines of businesses, so have the P&L, are women. So I think we're making progress, and I think financial services as a whole. I worked at a large bank for many, many years as well. I think financial services, to your point, and as part of the study, have done a good job. Is there room to improve? Absolutely. And I know we're going to talk more about that. But I think that it's great to see at the board level and executive level, starting to see that parity happening, if not close to parity.
Thanks. Stacey,
yeah, I'm happy to share my experience as well. So everybody, I work for Aviva Canada, is a great insurance company. We have been focused on building a diverse and inclusive culture at Aviva Canada for years, and we have seen some good results. Similar to Dilys, what she mentioned 2 years ago, we were the first financial service company in Canada to achieve that 50-50 male and female split at our VP plus job levels. And we also have 35% of visible minorities in these roles. So I think we wouldn't have been able to achieve these without focusing on succession planning and to the development of our women. However, I know from my own experience, I do think it's important to not just support women in their career development, but also meet women where they are in their career journey. And I shared my story within my company at International Women's Day, because I know a lot of women experienced the same thing as I did. So I wanted them to hear about it. So I'll quickly go share with my story too. So it's about 2 years ago, I was looking for a bigger challenge within my organization. So I shared with my senior leader, and they were very supportive. And I got connected with many other senior leaders within the organization to see what other opportunities are there for me. So well, everything was moving well, and I found out I was pregnant. So well, that was a good news for me, but then also I thought, okay, now I do need to think about whether we should stop these conversations, because there's no point to waste everybody's time. So I shared my thought with one of my leader, who's a male actually at Aviva Canada. And he looked at me and he asked me, look, Stacey, why do you think that matters? So I think at the moment that was unexpected to me. And I thought, okay, is it really, I'm thinking this way just because that's usually what happened to most of women. I know that's what happened to a lot of my friends and my mom and my grandmother, right? So, but then the true fact is that becoming a mother doesn't take any knowledge nor the experience that I have gained over my career. It doesn't define my capabilities. So I decided to continue my conversation and just to see what happens. So actually my current role that came up right before my maternity leave, and I told my the hiring manager at the time that I'm excited to join her team, and I'm really excited about bringing my value and my contribution to the table, but just in 12 months, not right now. And she said, that's not a problem. So we stay connected in that 12th month. So now looking back, I'm glad that I didn't just pause the conversation, because that's usually what happened. And part of the reason is the societal expectation and it's stereotypes that I think influence women's decision when the situations happen. So I do think, as a leader, we do need to recognize that we do need to meet women at where they are in their career. And as we're women who are looking for their career opportunities, I really recommend you sit in that driver's seat until the end. And the fact is that you don't have to choose between career and family. So that was my story to share.
I love that story, Stacey. I have a very similar experience with the timing of when my career was in a certain moving forward, as well as growing my family. And it's so great to hear other organizations like Aviva and like Meridian that share in this same journey on establishing more diversity and gender parity, and how your leaders, and particularly your male leader, was like just treated, it was so fair, right? And looked at what you brought to the table, not just in the moment, but over the long term. That's true commitment to you as an employee and in the value that you bring. So also, congratulations on both of your businesses for the statistics that you guys have achieved. It's such a journey, and those are incredible stats. So well done. So similarly, I'm a leader at CWB Financial Group. I lead one of the revenue generating lines of business here. And traditionally, and I think still holds true today, that does tend to have a lower percentage of leadership in our business, of female leadership, compared to some of the other corporate services departments that we might see, like finance and HR. And so I can actually remember when I first accepted the role back in 2017, the first meeting I had with my peers, and it was amazing. It was a welcoming dinner. It was lovely. Everyone on the team was lovely and incredibly supportive. But I remember being very aware when I walked into the room that I was the only female leader there. I was that awareness of that. And I think back to that night, looking back now 5 years later, and the tremendous progress that has been achieved. And so when we talk about, the examples that Stacey shared and why we can get to why we can make progress, I think the most important thing is that we have that true belief of the power that inclusivity brings to an organization, and have that embedded into our core values. And it has to start at the very, very top of the organization, and just be a part of everything that you do, right? And Stacey, we heard that in your example of how your leader reacted to probably a conversation that was really, really, I remember that one myself. It was really terrifying. And I had that similar reaction where it was just like, okay, congrats. Like I had this whole plan and PowerPoint deck of exactly how this was going to handle, and it was just like I was really scared of that conversation, and it couldn't have gone better. So when you have those core values embedded within your organization, the different strategies and the different initiatives that get built off of that, they're so authentic, right? And they're built around doing the right thing for the organization, because you're doing the right thing for your people, and that in turn is the right thing for your customers. So it's, we've had several that just have demonstrated tremendous success across CWB. I think one of the ones that I would call out is just that, we've brought awareness, and there's this, what do they call, a leadership diversity dashboard. And it's just, the more the more that you can make change and become aware. And sometimes it is being aware of that bias that you may not have just known that you had. So I think creating awareness and being transparent and having the courage to, maybe call out your own bias, or as Gayle shared earlier, that courage to be candid and speak up when it's important. And that, again, that all comes back to like that core value just being embedded in everything that you do.
I was just later on one piece. Oh, hopefully this sounds good. So, Alex, just to prove some progress has been made, I am obviously slightly older than Rejean and Stacey, and I have 3 grown kids. And my experience, and I was working for a very powerful woman many years ago when I got pregnant with my second child. And so to show that we've made progress, when I went in and had the conversation, at that time, Mat leave was only 6 months. And she said, "You're not planning on taking the full 6 months, are you?" So how far we've come. And I would say to you, I have 3 children, and I do believe that that deterred my career. Along the way, it pulled me back, right? And again, I was off maximum a year with my last one. So listening to these stories is very promising, and I think it shows directly the progress that has been made in the last 10 and 15 years. It may not feel it, and the numbers may be moving slowly, but I think the experiences are demonstrating just by the 2 conversations that we've had here today. So.
thanks both for sharing your story. I felt like, we all experienced kind of similar thing, but the thing is, timing of like expanding your family, that's not something that, really that you can plan on, right? And then I can share that there, and then after the fact, I talked to the women leader who hired me. So, and she basically told me that because she experienced the same thing, but on the other hand, she got a lot of challenges and rejections, like what Dilys, you said, right? She ended up had to quit her job because the workplace just does not give her any flexibility in order for her to take care of her daughter. So, that definitely was a battle. And then I think it's getting better, but are we like at a good place now? Probably not everybody's at the same place. So I think there's still a lot more work to do, but it's good that we share these experiences and stories, and we let the women who are going through or maybe going through in the future know there are other possibilities there for them. Yeah.
Thank you all for sharing that. There's a lot of themes I'd love to pick up on, but I suppose the one that's pulling at me most is just looking across the financial services sector. It's high stakes, it's high pressure, jobs are highly coveted, leadership roles are, some of the best positions in corporate Canada you can have. Why do you think that tension exists with between that the sort of reality of the sector and it being so progressive, I guess, relative to a lot of other sectors in enabling women to reach leadership goals and having achieved such demonstrable progress on that front?
I think that's a really great question. So why are financial services leading the charge, right? And I look at I spent 25 years at a very large bank, and I think that given the size of banks and insurance companies, and then I'm in a credit union which is the largest in Canada, but small relative to, or sorry, largest in Ontario, but small relative to the banks. So I think financial services, encompassing all financial service banks and insurance, their size is such that they need to step up, and they're under public scrutiny. I think they're under the public eye, and I think they're asked to be regulated in many cases. And so they really have to walk the talk and have to lead the charge in that space. I think it's just much more visible. Their shareholders are demanding it, the government's demanding it. And so I think, when we started the journey so many years ago, I think it was based on that. But then when they saw the benefits of it, the industry has seen the benefits of incorporating women at the highest level, being much more inclusive and changing the culture. The culture changes. And I think either Stacey or Rejean talked about that. You can't just put women in on the numbers. The culture has to be conducive to meet women's needs as they go through their various stages. And I don't even want to just call it women, because I think part of the other thing that's benefiting us as women is that most men are sharing in the childcare, they're sharing in the household, managing the household, and so they too are demanding work-life balance. And so I think that getting back to your question, I think it was just the sheer size of financial services to kind of lead the charge in it, starting with maybe regulatory or oversight that way. But now I think it's just embedded, in financial services culture. But I think in their culture of hiring, I still think we have work to do. But I think also in some organizations, there is still they haven't moved on culture. I would say my organization definitely. We don't have meetings, before 8:30, and that would be pretty early. And even at the most senior executive level, if there's childcare issues, those meetings will get bumped, so that one of our leaders said, I have to drop my kids off. I can't make that meeting. I can't be there for 8:30. So the executive meeting got pushed. So I think it's really important that it's not just about the numbers. Are we creating an environment in how we do business? Are we expecting emails to be responded on weekends 24/7. I have a really good example of a friend of mine who worked at a large bank, and she subsequently left, but she had two young twin daughters, and she was living in the suburbs and was commuting downtown. And her boss would set 7 a.m. meetings every week for reviews. And she phoned his EA and said, I can't make it in for 7 a.m. just because I've got the daycare. I can't drop my kids off at daycare at 6 a.m. Can we do this? Now this is pre-COVID. I think COVID has helped all of us from a virtual perspective. Can I dial in for it? And the answer was no. So now fast forward, that was many years ago, by the way, that was only like about four years ago. But fast forward now, I think COVID has proven to many that FaceTime does not equal capability or performance that people can get done. It can get done virtually. So I think all that to say, I think COVID has had its blessings to kind of get rid of this whole FaceTime. You have to be there before and after, and so that people can see you. But I think the culture is so important that it's not just the numbers. It's not just about the recruitment. It's about, does our culture really support work-life balance and or the needs, maybe the unique needs that women have?
I absolutely couldn't agree more with Dilys about that culture. So we, Aviva Canada, we're in the insurance industry. Now, having that diversity in leadership is so essential for creating an inclusive workplace. And why is that it's important? Because it leads to a better connection with our customers, with our brokers and our people. Unfortunately, I think the industry is still very male dominated and not diverse enough. So we often ask ourselves the question, are we as diverse as our customers, like the Canadians that we serve? And obviously the answer is no. So I think there are more work to do, but collectively, I think we need to do a better job at helping women see that financial service industry, insurance industry is where they can make a huge impact and difference. I think one lesson we learned, which we found is quite successful, is that we launched a returners program. So that was an initiative that was very successful with Aviva Investor. That's one of Aviva's companies in the UK. And then we launched in Canada after seeing the successful stories. So the program is tailored to helping women re-enter the workforce after they have taken a career break of 1 or more years. It starts with 6-month placement at Aviva, and then with the potential to transition that to a full-time role at the end. And the women who are the participants of the programs are provided with a mentor and giving them the specialized returning coaching program, giving them a really good package that including the flexibility that those are just talking about, recognizing that the hybrid working environment works. So that program, we see some good progress and good successful stories from that. We have hired women into the full-time positions after they graduate the program. So I think there are a lot of things that we are consciously doing and driving that progress forward.
Yeah, I couldn't, you used the word connect really well, Stacey, with your customers. And I think, absolutely, Dilys, the financial services sector is under a spotlight, both from a regulatory as well as from a consumer perspective. But I think I want to call out the fact where it's there's some oftentimes that you have the household responsibilities might fall on those who aren't potentially the key breadwinner in a family, right? And so traditionally, that's often been the female in the household, or those who the caregiver, the nurturer, who's making those decisions. And we think about financial services, and which is a sector we're all part of. Those decisions are being made often by not necessarily what's been represented at the decision makers at a boardroom previously. And so I think, potentially what's led to the charge and led the decision for an organization might not have been that thought, but it's certainly been the result, right? And I think organizations in the financial services sector are seeing the benefits, right? They're seeing the better business outcomes by having that better understanding of our customers, because you've got that diversity of thought, and you've got that, and by not just having representation, but being inclusive is in the culture, is what I hear you saying, Stacey. It's all around the fact that you create an equitable working environment so that your employees feel psychologically safe, and they'll be able to deliver their best results for the organization and for your customers. So if there is a regulatory shift and swing, which I can't see happening in Canada, I don't think this is going to change in our sector, because we know it leads to better business outcomes.
You raise a great point about, I guess, the societal narrative that still works against women, and trying to balance the home front with the work front is a challenge at the best of times. Even with the even division, it's doesn't leave a lot of time for wiggle room, and sometimes not much room for error. But to pull on that thread a little more, what do you think can be done to encourage male business leaders to become engaged advocates for gender equality, for sort of recognizing that these imbalances do exist, and that, like a lot of social changes can take time. So I'd be curious to your thoughts as to what men in corporate Canada can do, and what more they should recognize. It shouldn't take becoming parent for every man to realize that, like, oh wow, life is busy, but like balancing all this is Herculean at the best of times. So what do you think? What can be done?
I would say, I look at where my success has been. I've been predominantly, so I've been in financial services, but I've been in the male-dominated side of the business quite often, many years in commercial banking, and now heading up wealth. But I would say maybe looking at what has worked and how do you engage men into it. I do, again, feel optimistic. My son recently, 2 weeks ago, I went to his graduation, MSc in engineering at McGill. And there were thousands of people there and thousands of graduates, and they did the PhDs, they did the masters, MSCs, and then they did the undergrads. And I was just counting the PhDs, and over 50% of them were women in engineering. And the same thing happened with the MSCs, and then when you went down to the undergrads. So I think as this generation comes in, there's equality already happening, right, in the schools and the professionalism. But going back to your question, I think for me, what has served me well, and I think we need to continue to focus on this with men, is mentorship. Some of my best mentors have been men. They've given me confidence where I may not have had the confidence or had that confidence to in my ability to do a certain job. And so having more men mentor women, I think just embeds that in everybody's thinking, and it's a supportive way to do it rather than just through education. I think when you become part of a woman's success and you're a male, I think you send a good message across the organization. So for me, it's been very beneficial. I have male and female mentors, and I think that's really important. So I think mentorship, and I think education, I think Rejean may have touched on this, and Stacey, on the unconscious biases, right? I think it still very much exists in terms of what leadership is. And I think a good example of this is I recently, and just this week, I just finished watching the Hillary Clinton a documentary on Netflix. Love her or hate her, when you put her up against what Donald Trump had, I have this enormous new respect for Hillary Clinton as how smart she was. But yet during her campaign, here you had Trump. I'm not going to get into politics, but we know what his persona is, right? And then you had Hillary, and all she was being judged on was her look, her makeup, her outfit. Was she charismatic enough? Wasn't she? And so, when you get to men and women, leadership style can look very, very different. And that doesn't, and so much of the education has been on trying to make women adapt to that leadership style, whether, take up more space, adjust your voice, lower your voice, don't smile too much, or whatever. And so I think we need to, at a higher level, kind of say the male style of leadership is not necessarily what determines leadership. And I think so education has to go there. And let's stop forcing women to try and adopt the male style of leadership and integrate that much more into competencies, capability, and people focus. So
I love your story, Dilys, and I think just the postures then that we're conscious about ourselves, I think that really, we need to change that kind of perception on that. I think, having that male leaders advocate for gender equality is the way in order to create meaningful change. I think we do need to listen to our experience, our concerns, our perspectives. We need to champion the change. I think creating that awareness is the first step, but that's not enough. We do need to have that being part of their daily business, like from their hiring decisions, from their succession planning to their talent development. That all needs to maintain that diversity throughout. And they can be our strong allies. I think we do see some really good ones. I think for us, we really need to recognize them and celebrate the good things that the male leaders advocating for women, and so that can encourage others to follow suit. So I had observed a good example at my organization. That was a couple years ago when I was in my prior role. I attended a committee meeting with many senior leaders at the table. It was a big group. When our CEO came into the room, there was no seats at the table, only off to the side. And then a woman leader actually sat right beside me, was just about to stand up and give up her seat. The male leader actually sat beside her, put his hand on her forearm and asked her to keep her seat. So when I saw that, I was like, as much as we are asking women to sit at the table, we also need to recognize these male leaders who actually, think women deserve the seats at the table. And we need to share that and celebrate that so that others can, follow their leads.
So I have one request that everybody starts doing, whether you're a male or female. Maybe someone else has seen this on Instagram as well. Full disclosure, that's where I got it from. Let's stop saying working mom. I've never heard anyone say working dad, right? Like, so you're a mom. That's kind of, and you have a job. So I think there's some embedded biases that we use in everyday language that we can certainly we can all create some change in. So I have to throw that one out there because I just kept thinking about it today as we've shared our stories. And I think I really love that key of mentorship and coaching opportunities that we can create for some of our male leaders that Dilys brought up. I think it's just that creating those opportunities to learn, right? And to listen. And make them really beneficial. I think there's certainly events and there's opportunities, but I think if you can make it, just have a little bit more context and those one-to-one relationships. I have had the benefit of wonderful male leaders and champions of my career. Over the last 5 years, I've had, I think, 5 different male leaders, and each of them I have learned from, and each of them have given me the space to go through the very, very different challenges of what it's like during a pandemic with I think at the time I had a 1.5-year-old. And so it was just, they took that time to understand what my needs were and listen to just giving me that opportunity to be both a mom and have a career, not be a working mom. I wasn't judged in that way, or there was no judgment in that, I guess is what I should say, and there shouldn't be. So I think it's just like, how can we, if you're a male leader, how can you learn? How can you truly listen? And, how can you become an ally? And some of that can just be in that everyday language that you might be using that creates that division that really in your culture might not exist, but you kind of are, if it's just a small thing that we can do along the way to support more equality from a gender parity perspective.
That's the working dad thing the working mom thing is still blowing me for a loop. So yeah, much appreciated. I think that's something we could all do differently, and we probably should. we are getting very close to time. However, I just wanted to throw in one quick question of the audience, and maybe we could just do like a 1 minute hit from everyone. I just going back to the financial services industry, if you could identify maybe just a main driver within your company that, I'm thinking a specific policy project initiative, that has increased the number of women in leadership, different than other industries, I suppose.
I would say just make it quick. I think it's really about intention and reporting. So, having the measurement, having the intention, setting the culture, and building your pipeline for women. That is critical to getting getting more women into leadership. And then walk the talk. Have those senior women leaders. Make sure that you have senior women leaders that women can look up to.
Yeah, I think for me is how you populate your leadership team and create that pipeline for female talent. I think that's really important because especially for that really top leadership positions, I think when we look at the stats, it gets worse at the top, right? So that is the lack of representation, and that can be a huge barrier for women in their career progression. So we do need have those role models, that inspirations that can help women to dream bigger.
I don't know if it's different than other sectors, but truly having it embedded in those company core values it's so important. Where the financial services industry might be differentiate, and part of that might be the lens and the spotlight that we talked about earlier, and the expectation that's put upon that industry. But what gets measured gets done. And so when you set targets, when you set goals, and to what Dilys said earlier, when you track it, it gets done and it moves forward. So it can't just be an idea. It actually needs to have concrete, what's next, what are we going to do about it, and when are we going to achieve it?
I really appreciate that, and I absolutely hate that we're in time. This conversation absolutely flew by. It was far too short, but to our panelists, thank you so much. You were insightful. You were informative. I think you've left everyone with a lot to think about. Maybe we've got the makings of a podcast. I don't know. We can start with a blow by blow of the 2016 presidential election, if you like, and see if it gets some trash. But even this really, your personal experiences really helped drive the conversation. And again, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with everyone today. It is sincerely appreciated.